In the cutthroat chess game of naval warfare, some pieces are queens, destined for glory. Others are pawns, designed to be sacrificed. For the two small carriers of the Zuihō class, their fate was to be both. They were born from a loophole, a clever deception to skirt the rules of a world trying to prevent another war. But when that war came, these ships were thrown into the fire. One would become a chilling footnote in history, the first of her kind to be lost in a new age of combat. The other would fight on, a survivor again and again, until she was called upon to play the most dangerous role of all, the bait in a final, desperate gamble to save an empire. This is the story of the Zuihō class, the auspicious phoenixes that flew through the firestorm of the Pacific War. In the aftermath of the First World War, the great naval powers gathered to sign the Washington Naval Treaty in 1922. It was a gentleman's agreement to stop the world from sliding into another ruinous arms race. The treaty placed strict limits on the number and size of warships, especially the new kings of the sea, aircraft carriers. Japan, as a signatory, found its ambitions checked. The Imperial Japanese Navy, or IJN, was a proud and powerful force, and its leaders chafed under these restrictions. They believed Japan's destiny required a navy second to none, and if treaties stood in the way, then cleverness would have to find a path around them. This gave rise to what was known as the Shadow Fleet. The idea was simple but ingenious. The IJN would design and build a series of auxiliary, non-combatant ships, submarine tenders, seaplane tenders, and fleet oilers that were not restricted by the treaty. But these ships had a secret. They were designed from the keel up with a second life in mind. Their internal structures, machinery spaces, and overall layout were all engineered for rapid conversion into aircraft carriers should the need arise. They were warships hiding in plain sight. In the mid-1930s, as Japan's militaristic ambitions grew and the treaty system began to crumble, this shadow program kicked into high gear. Two of these shadow vessels were the submarine tenders Tsurugisaki and Takasaki. Laid down in 1935 and 1936 respectively, they were built to support Japan's large fleet of submarines on long-range operations. On the surface, they were unremarkable auxiliaries. But beneath the decks, the future was already taking shape. The designers had made provisions for the installation of aircraft elevators and a flight deck. The original diesel engines they were fitted with were intentionally designed to be easily removed and replaced with more powerful destroyer-type steam turbines, giving them the speed necessary to keep up with a battle fleet. When Japan withdrew from the naval treaties in 1937, the veil was lifted. The conversion work began. On Tsurugisaki, the transformation was carried out while the ship was still being fitted out. Her sister, Takasaki, had her conversion started after she was launched, but before she was ever commissioned in her original role. The process was a major undertaking. The superstructure was stripped away. The diesel engines were pulled out and replaced with compact, powerful geared steam turbines, the same kind used on Japan's Zuihō-class destroyers. This change more than doubled their horsepower and pushed their top speed from a leisurely 20 knots to a much more respectable 28 knots, or about 52 kilometers per hour. Above the hull, a hangar was constructed, capable of holding their modest air group. Capping it all was a wooden planked flight deck, stretching 590 feet, 180 meters in length. Unlike the larger fleet carriers, the Zuihō class had no island superstructure. The bridge and command facilities were located on a platform at the forward end of the flight deck, just below deck level. The funnel for the engine exhaust was a small, retractable affair on the starboard side that could be angled downwards and out to sea, keeping the deck clear of smoke during air operations. When the work was done, 2 new warships had been born. Takasaki was the first to be commissioned in her new form in December 1940, renamed IJN Zuihō, the Auspicious Phoenix. Her sister Tsurugisaki followed a year later, commissioned in January 1942, just as the war in the Pacific was exploding. She was renamed IJN Shōhō, the Happy Phoenix. Together, they formed the Zuihō class of light aircraft carriers. They were small, displacing around 11,400 long tons, and could carry an air group of about 30 aircraft, typically a mix of Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters and Nakajima B5N torpedo bombers. Their defensive armament was light, consisting of just 8 127mm dual-purpose guns and a handful of 25mm anti-aircraft cannons. They were not meant to slug it out with enemy fleets directly. They were support carriers, intended to provide air cover for invasion forces, hunt for submarines, and supplement the main carrier force. But war rarely respects intentions. The Happy Phoenix, Zuihō and Shōhō, had a tragically short life. Rushed into service a month after the attack on Pearl Harbor, she was immediately thrown into the fray. Her first and only major assignment was a critical piece of Japan's next big move, Operation MO. This was the ambitious plan to seize Port Moresby on the southern coast of New Guinea. Capturing Port Moresby would sever the lifeline between the United States and Australia, effectively isolating the continent and giving Japan a dominant strategic position in the South Pacific. Shōhō was assigned as the flagship of the main force of the Port Moresby invasion group, under the command of Rear Admiral Aritomo Goto. Her job was to provide air cover for the troop transports as they made their way towards the target. Sailing with her were 4 heavy cruisers and a destroyer. It was a powerful surface force, but in this new kind of war, everything depended on control of the air. And for the first time, the IJN was about to face an enemy who could challenge them for it: the carriers of the United States Navy. In early May 1942, American intelligence, thanks to broken Japanese naval codes, knew Operation MO was coming. Task Force 17, centered on the carrier USS Yorktown, was sent to intercept. It was soon joined by Task Force 11, with the carrier USS Lexington. In the vast expanse of the Coral Sea, the stage was set for a historic confrontation, the first naval battle in history where the opposing fleets never saw each other. All the fighting would be done by aircraft. On May 7th, the hunt began. Japanese scout planes mistakenly reported an American carrier and cruiser, which were actually the fleet oiler Neosho and its escorting destroyer, the USS Sims. Aircraft from the main Japanese carriers, Shokaku and Zuikaku, were sent to attack, sinking both ships but wasting precious time and fuel on secondary targets. Meanwhile, American scout planes were also searching. At around 7:30 in the morning, a pilot from Yorktown spotted Shōhō and her escorts. He radioed back a report: "One baby flattop." The Americans knew this was their chance to draw first blood. They marshaled a massive strike force, a total of 93 aircraft, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighters, launched from Lexington and Yorktown and thundered towards Shōhō's position. The Japanese carrier was caught completely off guard. Her small combat air patrol of just 3 Zeros was overwhelmed. The sky above Shōhō turned into a storm of bombs and torpedoes. The attack was relentless and brutally efficient. Lieutenant Commander Robert E. Dixon, leading the scout bombers from Lexington, famously radioed back the message that would enter the annals of naval history: "Scratch one flattop, signed Bob." Shōhō was hit by at least 7 torpedoes and 13 bombs within minutes. The damage was catastrophic. Fires raged out of control, fueled by aviation gasoline and armed aircraft in her hangar. Her steering was knocked out, and she began to list heavily. The order to abandon ship was given. Just 15 minutes after the first bomb hit, the Happy Phoenix capsized and slid beneath the waves, taking 631 of her 834-man crew with her. Zuihō and Shōhō had the grim distinction of being the first Japanese aircraft carrier sunk in World War II. Her loss was a shock to the IJN and a major propaganda victory for the Allies, but the Battle of the Coral Sea was far from over. It would end as a tactical victory for Japan, who sank the larger USS Lexington, but a strategic victory for the Allies, who had turned back the invasion of Port Moresby. While her sister met a swift and violent end, the Auspicious Phoenix, Zuihō and Zuihō, would live up to her name, at least for a time. Commissioned over a year before Shōhō, she had a more gradual entry into the war. Her first significant duty was providing air cover for the returning Kido Butai, the main carrier strike force, after its successful raid on Pearl Harbor. Afterwards, she was used primarily as an aircraft ferry, transporting planes from Japan to newly conquered territories like the Philippines. In June 1942, Zuihō participated in the pivotal Battle of Midway. She was part of the Second Fleet, the main invasion force commanded by Admiral Nobutake Kondo. Her role was to provide air support for the troops landing on Midway Atoll itself after the main carriers had smashed the island's defenses. But as history records, the main carrier force was ambushed and annihilated by American dive bombers. With the loss of 4 fleet carriers in a single day, the invasion was called off. Zuihō never saw direct combat and retreated with the rest of the shattered Japanese fleet. Her trial by fire would come a few months later. During the brutal, grinding attrition of the Guadalcanal campaign, the fight for this jungle-covered island was a meat grinder for both sides. In late October 1942, Zuihō was part of a large Japanese fleet under Admiral Kondo that was seeking a decisive battle with the American carriers supporting the U.S. Marines on the island. This led to the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. On the morning of October 26th, Zuihō launched a strike against the American fleet. At the same time, American planes from the USS Enterprise found her. 2 SBD Dauntless dive bombers, flying ahead of the main American strike group, spotted the Japanese carrier. They dove through a screen of anti-aircraft fire and defending Zeros. One of the 500-pound, 227-kilogram bombs missed, but the other slammed into the aft end of Zuihō's flight deck. The explosion tore a 50-foot, 15-meter hole in the deck, rendering her incapable of conducting air operations. While the damage was not life-threatening, she was out of the fight. She was forced to withdraw for repairs, her air group landing on the carrier Zuikaku. The battle was a costly tactical victory for Japan. They sank the USS Hornet, but they lost far more aircraft and irreplaceable, experienced pilots than the Americans, losses they could ill afford. After repairs, Zuihō's career entered a new phase. For much of 1943, the nature of the Pacific War was changing. Japan was on the defensive, and its carrier force was being husbanded. Zuihō spent this period primarily as a training carrier and an aircraft ferry. She shuttled new planes and pilots to major bases like Truk and Rabaul. Her own experienced air group was often detached and sent to fight from land bases, where they were slowly ground down by superior Allied numbers and improving tactics. As the war turned against Japan, the threat from American air power grew exponentially. Like all surviving Japanese warships, Zuihō underwent significant upgrades to her anti-aircraft defenses. Her initial light battery of 25mm cannons was massively increased. By mid-1944, she bristled with them. Her final armament included 20 25mm triple mounts and another 8 single mounts, for a total of 68 barrels. She was also fitted with 8 28-round 120mm rocket launchers. These weapons fired incendiary or high-explosive shells in a shotgun-like pattern, designed to throw up a wall of flak to disrupt attacking aircraft formations. The ship was a porcupine of guns, a testament to the desperate reality that Japan had lost control of the skies. By the autumn of 1944, Japan was backed into a corner. The Americans were poised to invade the Philippines, which would cut Japan off from the vital oil and resources of Southeast Asia. The IJN, a shadow of its former self, marshaled its remaining strength for one final cataclysmic roll of the dice. Operation Shogo 1, the defense of the Philippines. The plan was incredibly complex and desperate. It involved splitting the entire remaining Japanese fleet into 3 separate forces that would converge on the American invasion fleet at Leyte Gulf from different directions. The success of the entire operation hinged on a 4th force, a decoy. This decoy was the Northern Force, commanded by Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa. It was built around the last 4 remaining Japanese aircraft carriers: the fleet carrier Zuikaku, the last survivor of the Pearl Harbor Strike Force, and the 3 light carriers Zuihō, Chitose, and Chiyoda. On paper, it looked like a powerful carrier group. In reality, it was a hollow shell. The 4 carriers combined could only scrape together about 116 aircraft, crewed by inexperienced, hastily trained pilots. They had no dive bombers at all. Their mission was not to fight, but to be found. They were to sail south from Japan and deliberately expose themselves to the American fleet, hoping to lure Admiral William Bull Halsey's mighty Third Fleet, with its 9 fleet carriers and 6 light carriers, northwards and away from the beaches of Leyte. This would, in theory, leave the vulnerable American transports open to attack by the powerful Japanese battleship forces coming from the west. Zuihō, the Auspicious Phoenix, was now officially bait. On October 24, 1944, Ozawa's northern force was spotted by American patrol planes. The bait was taken. Admiral Halsey, believing the main Japanese carrier threat was in front of him, made the controversial decision to take his entire Third Fleet steaming north at full speed to annihilate it. He left the San Bernardino Strait completely unguarded. Ozawa's sacrifice was working. The morning of October 25th brought the inevitable. The sky over Ozawa's fleet filled with hundreds of American aircraft. The battle off Cape Engano had begun. The American pilots were stunned by the weakness of the Japanese air cover. They swept aside the few defending Zeros and began their attacks. The first strike focused on the smaller carriers. Chitose was quickly hit and sank. Zuikaku, the prime target, was hammered but remained afloat. Zuihō, maneuvering skillfully, dodged the first wave of attacks, but there was no escape. A second massive strike arrived around 10 in the morning. Zuihō was hit by a torpedo that flooded her starboard engine room, cutting her speed. A bomb then struck her flight deck, starting fires. A third wave of over 200 aircraft sealed her fate. She took at least 2 more bomb hits and another torpedo. Her port engine room flooded, and the ship went dead in the water, listing heavily to port. Her flight deck was a blazing wreck, and the sheer number of holes in her hull from near misses meant flooding was uncontrollable. Her captain, Kenjiro Sugi, gave the order to abandon ship. The crew gathered on the tilting flight deck, gave a final banzai cheer towards the Emperor's palace, and went into the water. At 3:26 in the afternoon, Zuihō capsized and sank, taking 215 of her crew with her. Her sacrifice, along with the rest of Ozawa's fleet, had been successful in its primary objective. Halsey's fleet was drawn away, but the main Japanese surface forces, despite a brave fight, were ultimately unable to break through and destroy the invasion fleet. The Shogo plan had failed, and with it, the Imperial Japanese Navy was finished as an effective fighting force. The Zuihō-class carriers represent a fascinating chapter in naval history. Born of deception and necessity, their careers were short, violent, and deeply consequential. The Shōhō, the Happy Phoenix, earned her place in history for all the wrong reasons, becoming the first symbol of a vulnerability the IJN had thought impossible. Her sinking was a brutal education in the realities of carrier versus carrier combat. In contrast, the Zuihō, the Auspicious Phoenix, proved to be a resilient and valuable workhorse. She fought in some of the most important naval battles of the war, surviving damage that would have crippled other ships, a testament to the skill of her crew and perhaps a little bit of luck. In the end, these light carriers were exactly what they were designed to be: supplementary assets. They were too small, too slow, and too lightly protected to ever be mistaken for frontline fleet carriers. Yet, the demands of total war pushed them into roles they were never truly meant for. They were stopgaps, placeholders in a fleet that was losing its titans one by one. Their story is a microcosm of the IJN itself, one of initial cleverness and stunning success, followed by a long, brutal decline into desperation, and finally, sacrificial destruction. They were the phoenixes that couldn't quite rise from the ashes of a losing war. We've covered the dramatic lives of these converted carriers, but the history of naval aviation is filled with countless other stories of innovation, desperation, and incredible bravery. What piece of military history, legendary machine, or untold story should we investigate next? Let us know your ideas in the comments below. Your mission briefing could become our next deep dive. If you enjoyed uncovering the tale of the Zuihō and Shōhō, and you want to keep exploring the fascinating world of military hardware and history, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more to cover, and you won't want to miss what's next.